I've smoked weed with both Nick and Nate Diaz. And the first Diaz brother I ever encountered was Nate at the UFC 117 after party that I hosted with Jake Shields for Savage Inc. Fightwear at Road Nightclub, August 7th, 2010. It was a great event. Chuck Liddell, Dave Bautista, Eddie Bravo, basically the who's who of mixed martial arts was in attendance at that party. And when I stepped outside, I saw Nate Diaz in front of the Gold Club, and I lit up a joint, and we just started smoking and hanging out. And this is, well before he fought Connor, so only really hardcores knew him. He had won the Ultimate Fighter at the time, but there wasn't this star power that he accumulated after he beat Connor. That's really what broke Nate. And then my next encounter with the Diaz brothers was in 2015, I believe, at the Hollywood Roosevelt. And I actually wrote about this in a book that I wrote about my former life as a cannabis broker in California. So I was in LA. I was hanging out for a recording of Ari Shaffir's This Is Not Happening television show, which was taking place that week. I produced Ari's podcast called Punch Drunk Sports for years with Sam Tripoli. And so I went down to LA to watch Ari's performance live. And I'm hanging out at the Roosevelt, which is like my favorite hotel in LA. I'm at the pool. I'm just chilling. And you see this commotion start. There was these tables across the pool where Nick was hanging out. And I saw these groups of people just coming up and saying hi. And I was like, okay, I got to go see what's going on. It was Nate Diaz. I'm like, okay. So I walk up, hey, I'm a blue belt under Denny Prokopos, Eddie Bravo's first black belt. And he knew Denny. Denny was a known commodity at jiu-jitsu, especially, 10, 11 years ago, the sport wasn't as popular. So the community was a lot smaller. So people knew who people were. So he knew who Denny was. I said, hey, do you want to smoke a joint? He's like, yeah, sure. So I ran back to my cabana, rolled up a bunch of joints, and we just smoked weed by the pool until the sun went down. And one of his buddies who he was with had a cabana on the second floor at the Roosevelt. So we went up to the cabana room, and that's where Nick told me something that I said on the podcast when I called, because I called Ari and Sam on the podcast Punch Drunk Sports, and I told him what he had told me about Dana White. And in my book, I didn't say this, but I guess it's kind of common knowledge. And I actually said this on the podcast. Ari hung up on me when I said it. So according to Nick Diaz, allegedly, Dana was hooking up with the ring card girls, which is maybe like the biggest known secret that's not a secret. But I heard that from Nick Diaz himself personally. He's like, no, dude, that's what Dana does. Allegedly, from what I've been told. It's not... Don't sue me, Dana. I gave you Fight Pass. I gave you some other ideas 15 years ago. Be cool. So that's what Nick said. And then, so that evening, I just kind of, I spent like 3 or 4. I spent way longer smoking weed with Nick Diaz than I actually thought I would end up smoking weed with Nick Diaz. And then my third encounter with the Diaz brother was after Nate had beaten Connor. So his star had really risen. And my jiu-jitsu coach, Denny Prokopos, who I mentioned earlier, Eddie Bravo's first black belt, he's known Jake Shields and these guys for years. Denny was training jiu-jitsu before jiu-jitsu even really is well known. Denny started training jiu-jitsu when he was like 13 years old. And he got his black belt from Eddie when he was like 18. So he knew, he knows Jake, he knows all those guys. So Denny texted me at it was like 11 o'clock on a Thursday or 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock on a Thursday. And Denny never just texted me randomly like that. So I knew something was going on. He's like, hey, come down to Harlot Nightclub. Harlot Nightclub is on like Minna and First in the Soma of San Francisco. So I drove down from my house in the city to meet up with Denny, my jiu-jitsu coach. And he told me, hey, we're in these, if you've been to Harlot Nightclub, there's like a bunch of tables in the middle of the dance floor. And he's like, hey, we're in the tables in the middle of the dance floor. So I pull up. I go through, I knew the bouncer, so I walked past the line. I got into the club. I meet up with Denny, and there's Nate Diaz, Jake Shields, Gilbert Melendez, basically all the stars of the Scrap Pack were partying at Harlot that night. So, I introduced myself to Jake, who I've known years. I was like, what's up? Saying what's up. I introduced myself to Gilbert, and then Nate is just basically just on his phone the whole time. And I'll put a picture I have actually of Nate on his phone, assuming I can find it through all my pictures. I'll actually put some of these pictures from the event. Like I'll put my picture with Nick, put my picture that I took of Nate on his phone because he was not. After he got turned into a star, he really did just kind of. If he didn't know you before he beat Connor, he wasn't trying to make friends with you unless there was something you could do for his career. That was the energy I got because when I had smoked with him before he beat Connor, he was much more personable. But when you get that much attention from the whole world, I guess part of you wants to just start walling off unless there's something that's advantageous to you. Because especially because people always want something from famous people. So we partied at Harlot with Jake, Gilbert, Nate until the club closed. And that was pretty cool. So yeah, I've smoked weed with both Diaz brothers. I've hung out with Nick. I've hung out with Nate. That is kind of the cool thing. If you train in the martial arts, especially jiu-jitsu, especially kickboxing, you're going to encounter these people. You're going to run into these people. There isn't the same separation between UFC fighters and other types of professional athletes. And that's what kind of makes the sport special is there really is no firewall. You can walk into a professional gym and train alongside fighters. It's just the coolest part of this sport. So I've smoked weed with Nick and Nate Diaz. It's been quite a journey. I'm really lucky to say that I've had those experiences, and I'm just grateful and thankful that you might find that entertaining or enjoyable. So I'm James, aka Mr. 3. I always do my best to be my best. I'm going to post as often as I can and tell you my stories, my takes, and my opinion on what is arguably the greatest sport on earth and the only sport that I watch and the only thing that I do besides train jiu-jitsu. So thanks for your time. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.